who believed that cannabis was as bad as I did in 1967. Now, I spent 3 years researching it before I was able to overcome this. Well, it didn't take 3 years to overcome it, but to put it together. People have to overcome those beliefs because, at first they believe it's this terribly destructive drug. And to think of it now as a medicine, that's a sea change in the way people have to think about it.
But, with the obvious application of marijuana to the treatment of, say, cancer patients, are you aware of established medical organizations such as the American Society of Oncology endorsing or even acknowledging?
Not yet, but I'll bet you a quarter it'll happen pretty soon. The U.S. government took the view that I was perpetrating a hoax on the American people, and then McCaffrey, the drug czar, commissions the Institute of Medicine to do this study. What happens? They come up, they do this study, and they come out, yes, marijuana does have usefulness as a medicine. So these things are not, it's taking time, but I think the progress now is really geometric, and that we're going to see this. And look what's happening in other parts of the world where this is concerned. Other countries, particularly in Western Europe, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they're making even faster progress.
The medical establishment is...
The medical establishment as well as people in general, understanding that this whole notion of marijuana as such a dangerous drug is indeed a little delusional.
Well, Dr. Grinspoon, thank you so much for being with us this evening, and we'll be looking forward to watching your lectures on marijuana. We've been really happy to have you on the program any number of times, actually, since last year, and we'll continue benefiting from your great input until we reach our common destination. Thank you.
My pleasure.
A short bibliography is Marijuana Reconsidered and Marijuana the Forbidden Medicine. After teaching at Harvard for over 3 decades, Lester retired this past year, and in many ways we are the benefactors of that, because even though Lester has always been one, and at great personal pain and some academic jeopardy, has been the quintessential truth teller regarding this topic. Every year, I can annually convince Lester to come out to Cape Cod with me and trick him into believing that the real pursuit for me is to go out and catch a behemoth of a striped bass. And he falls for this every year. It's great. The reason why I enjoy it so is because it's the ability to spend real quality time away from everybody else and try to glean pearls of wisdom from his considerable wealth and knowledge and expertise. Most importantly, to learn more about myself and my humanity. Lester has already published this in our own scheduling. He had some concerns about this, and I told him that I thought that it would be good if he put it out there so those of us who got here in advance could read it and understand it. But knowing his voice and knowing his tones, we can now hear it delivered to us, and to understand, I hope fully, how difficult it is at this point from so many people to speak the truth about drugs, and specifically marijuana. And with that, I invite one of my very, very close friends and intellectual mentors, Lester Grinspoon.
Recognize it as another instance of the madness of crowds. Everyone in this room has already arrived at this understanding, but for some of us, enlightenment came later than we would have wished. Consistent with my goal of the Uses of Marijuana project, which is, for any of you who are interested, at www.marijuana-uses.com, consistent with the goals of that project of encouraging users to write about their involvement with cannabis, I thought I would share something of my cannabis enlightenment, a story that now spans a third of a century. In every life, there occur seminal events that modify the seemingly established trajectory of one's personal history. For me, 3 of the 4 big ones were, in chronological order, the decision to go to medical school, the extraordinary good fortune of meeting the woman I married, and the gift of children. The 4th was my improbable encounter with cannabis, an event that divided my life into 2 eras, the before cannabis era and the cannabis era. My son David refers to these phases of my life as BC and AD, for before cannabis and after dope. My cannabis era began to unfold in 1967. As the senior author of a book on schizophrenia, I found myself with what I estimated would be 2 to 3 months, relatively free months, before my co-authors would finish their chapters. Because I had become concerned that so many young people were using the terribly dangerous drug marijuana, I decided to use the time to review the medical literature so that I could write a reasonably objective and scientifically sound paper on the harmfulness of this substance. Young people were ignoring the warnings of the government, but perhaps some would seriously consider a well-documented review of the available data. So I began my systematic review of the medical and scientific literature bearing on the toxicity, mental and physical, of marijuana. It never occurred to me then that there were dimensions of this drug that warranted exploration. There were other dimensions of this drug that warranted exploration. During my initial foray into this literature, I discovered, to my astonishment, that I had to seriously question what I believed I knew about cannabis. As I began to appreciate that what I thought I understood was largely based on myths, old and new, I realized how little my training in science and medicine had protected me against this misinformation. I had become not just a victim of a disinformation campaign, but because I was a physician, one of its agents as well. Believing that I should share my skepticism about the established understanding of marijuana, I wrote a long paper which was published in the now defunct International Journal of Psychiatry. A shorter version was published as the lead article in the December 1969 issue of Scientific American. In these papers, I questioned whether the almost ubiquitous belief that marijuana was an exceedingly harmful drug was supported by any substantial data to be found in the scientific and medical literature. While there was little reaction to the paper published in Psychiatry Journal, there was much interest in the Scientific American article. Within a week of the appearance of this article, I received a visit from the Associate Director of the Harvard University Press, who suggested that I consider writing a book on marijuana. I found the idea both attractive and daunting. The subject was worthy of a book-length exposition, and I would have a reason to deepen my exploration of this fascinating and harmful misunderstanding. And there was another reason, perhaps the most compelling of all. The one aspect of my work that interested my 12-year-old son Danny was my study of marijuana. His illness began in July of 1967, just about the time I had decided to learn about the dangers of marijuana. He was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia, and his prognosis was, of course, grave. He was both excited and pleased when I told him that I'd decided to write the book. A few weeks later,